The massive ship drifted silently through the cold darkness of space. For 53 years, the UNS Valkyrie had been floating like a dead whale in the Kuiper Belt, far from the warm light of Earth's sun. Its 12-kilometer hull was dark and cold, with no lights to show that anyone lived inside. Captain Jake Morrison opened his eyes slowly. The cryogenic pod hissed as it opened, and cold air rushed into his lungs. His body felt stiff and strange, like he had been sleeping for a very long time. Which he had. The ship's computer spoke in a calm female voice. Captain Morrison, emergency wake protocol activated. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in Coalition space. Jake sat up carefully, his head spinning. The medical bay around him was dark except for a few emergency lights. He was the only person awake on a ship that held 50,000 sleeping humans. The thought made him feel very alone. "Show me the sensor data," he said, his voice rough from the long sleep. A holographic display appeared in front of him, showing star maps and energy readings. Jake studied the information with growing concern. Massive fleets were moving through Coalition space, but they weren't Coalition ships. These vessels had energy signatures he had never seen before. The computer continued its report. Intelligence intercepts suggest a new threat has emerged. Coalition forces are calling them Void Hunters. Multiple worlds have gone dark along the outer rim. Jake stood up slowly, testing his legs. His muscles were weak from the long sleep, but they would get stronger. He had been a soldier for most of his life, and his body knew how to recover quickly. He walked through the empty corridors of the Valkyrie, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship was enormous, with decks stretching in all directions. Fighter bays, weapon systems, living quarters, hydroponics gardens, and manufacturing facilities filled the massive vessel. It was designed to be a city in space capable of operating for years without resupply, but now it was a tomb. A beautiful, deadly tomb floating in the darkness. Jake made his way to the command center, where he began waking his senior officers. Commander Lisa Hayes was the first to emerge from her cryogenic sleep. She was a tough woman with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had been his tactical officer before the war ended, and he trusted her judgment completely. "How long?" she asked as soon as she could speak clearly. 53 years, Jake replied. The Coalition won. Humanity is confined to the solar system. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. When she opened them again, they were hard and determined. "What's our situation?" "Something new has entered Coalition space. They're calling them Void Hunters, and from what I can tell, the Coalition is losing badly." Next came Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark, the chief engineer. He was a thin man with nervous energy and brilliant technical skills. Even half awake from cryo-sleep, he was already asking about the ship's systems and power levels. "How long can we stay hidden?" Ryan asked, checking readouts on a portable tablet. "As long as we keep power at minimum levels," Jake replied. "But if we fully activate the ship's systems, they'll detect us within hours." Dr. Susan Blake was the last to wake. She was responsible for the medical systems and the revival of the crew. She was a calm, thoughtful woman who always seemed to understand things that others missed. "We can wake the crew in stages," she said after Jake explained the situation. "But it will take weeks to bring everyone out of cryo safely. And once they're awake, we'll need full life support systems online." The four officers sat around a conference table in the empty command center. Through the large windows they could see the stars and the distant tiny disk of the sun. Earth was invisible from this distance, but they all knew it was out there, probably still under Coalition control. "So what are our options?" Jake asked, looking at each of his officers. Lisa spoke first. "We could stay hidden. Wait and see what happens. Maybe these Void Hunters will weaken the Coalition enough for us to make a move later. Or maybe they'll destroy everything," Ryan added. "Including Earth," Susan nodded slowly. "The intelligence reports suggest complete planetary destruction. No survivors. If these creatures reach human space..." Jake studied the sensor data again. The Void Hunter attacks followed a clear pattern. They appeared suddenly, overwhelmed local defenses, and then the planet simply went dark. No distress calls, no refugee ships, nothing. "Just silence. There's something else," Jake said quietly. "Look at these energy readings from the Coalition battles." The holographic display showed weapon fire from both sides. The Coalition forces used advanced energy beams, plasma cannons, and particle weapons. The Void Hunters seemed to absorb or deflect most of these attacks without significant damage. "Their ships adapt," Lisa observed. "Each time the Coalition hits them with energy weapons, they seem to become more resistant." Like they're learning, Susan agreed. Or evolving. Ryan leaned forward, studying the technical data. You know what I don't see in any of these battles? Kinetic weapons. Old-fashioned missiles and railguns. The Coalition stopped using kinetic weapons decades ago, Jake said. They consider them primitive. Primitive but effective, Ryan replied. Energy weapons might be useless against adaptive technology, but a chunk of metal moving at high speed is still a chunk of metal. The room fell silent as they all considered the implications. The Valkyrie was equipped with both modern energy weapons and older kinetic systems. It was designed to fight both Coalition forces and more primitive enemies. That mixed armament might be exactly what was needed now. Jake made his decision. We wake the crew, all of them. It will take time, but we need to be ready for action. The Coalition will detect us as soon as we power up, Lisa warned. I know, Jake replied, but if we don't act, there might not be a Coalition left to worry about. Or a humanity. Dr. Blake began planning the revival procedures while Ryan started bringing ship systems online. Lisa worked on tactical assessments and battle plans. Jake stood at the command center windows looking out at the stars. For 53 years, the Valkyrie had been hiding in the darkness, waiting for a chance to strike back at the Coalition. Now that chance had come, but not in the way any of them had expected. Instead of fighting their old enemies, they might have to save them. The irony was not lost on Jake. The ship that was supposed to win the war for humanity might end up saving the very people who had defeated them. But if that's what it took to protect Earth and the rest of the galaxy, then that's what they would do. The revival process began, and slowly the Valkyrie started to wake up from its long sleep. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Morrison made the decision to wake the sleeping giant. The UNS Valkyrie slowly came back to life, deck by deck, system by system. The massive fusion reactors that had been cold for over 50 years began to glow with controlled nuclear fire, sending power throughout the enormous ship. In the medical bays, thousands of crew members were emerging from their long sleep. The process was slow and careful. Dr. Blake and her medical teams worked around the clock, monitoring each person as they woke up from cryogenic suspension. Some people woke up easily, while others needed more time and care. Commander Hayes walked through the ship's corridors, watching her crewmates return to life. The sight was both wonderful and heartbreaking. These people had gone to sleep expecting to wake up in a few months, maybe a year at most. Instead, they had slept for 53 years while the world changed around them. How are they handling it? Jake asked when Lisa reported to the command center. It's hard for them, she replied honestly. Many of them had families on Earth, children who are now older than they are. Parents who died decades ago. Some of them are struggling with the reality of what happened. Jake nodded grimly. He understood their pain. He had his own losses to deal with. His younger brother would be an old man now if he was still alive. The woman he had loved was probably married to someone else, with grandchildren he would never meet. But there was no time to dwell on personal losses. The threat to the galaxy was growing worse every day. Intelligence reports showed that the Void Hunters were spreading faster, attacking more systems, destroying more worlds. Lieutenant Commander Clark had good news about the ship's systems. All main reactors are online and stable, he reported. Weapon systems are charging up nicely. Life support is working perfectly. We're at about 60% of full operational capacity. How long until we're at 100%? Jake asked. Another week, maybe 2 if we want to be really careful, Ryan replied. The ship's been asleep for a long time. I want to make sure everything is working properly before we push it hard. Dr. Blake entered the command center with her daily report. We've successfully revived 28,000 crew members. The rest will be awake within the next few days. Medical says everyone is healthy, but morale is a real problem. Jake had been expecting this. What kind of problems are we seeing? Depression mostly. Some anger. A few people are having trouble accepting that so much time has passed. I've had to put 3 people on suicide watch. Susan's face was grave. These people need something to fight for, Captain. They need a purpose. As if summoned by her words, the ship's communication system crackled to life. The voice was alien, speaking in the Coalition's common trade language. It was a distress call. This is Admiral Keth Zor of the Coalition Third Fleet. We are under attack at New Geneva. Repeat, we are under attack by unknown hostile forces. All Coalition vessels in range, please respond. We are taking heavy casualties. The message repeated several times, then cut to static. Jake looked at his officers. They all understood what this meant. The Void Hunters had found another target, and the Coalition was losing. "How far is New Geneva?" Jake asked. Lisa checked the navigation systems. 2 days at maximum speed. It's a major industrial world with about 12 million people. Ryan pulled up tactical information about the system. The Third Fleet is one of their best. 15 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and about 100 smaller vessels. If they're calling for help, the situation must be really bad. Jake studied the star charts, thinking hard. New Geneva was deep in Coalition space, far from the border with human territory. If the Valkyrie went there, they would definitely be detected by Coalition forces. There would be no more hiding, but there was something else to consider. Jake called up the sensor logs from recent Coalition battles with the Void Hunters. The pattern was clear. Energy weapons were almost useless against the alien ships. The creatures seemed to adapt to each attack, becoming stronger and more resistant. "Ryan, show me our weapon systems," Jake ordered. The engineer brought up detailed schematics of the Valkyrie's armament. The ship carried the latest energy weapons, including plasma cannons and particle beams. But it also carried older systems that most modern ships had abandoned. "Look at this," Ryan said, pointing to a section of the ship. "We have 48 kinetic missile launchers and 12 heavy railguns. They're old technology, but they're reliable." "And the Coalition stopped using kinetic weapons years ago," Lisa added. "They think they're too primitive." Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. Primitive weapons against adaptive enemies. Sometimes old solutions work better than new ones. Dr. Blake looked confused. "Are you suggesting we go to New Geneva? That we help the Coalition?" "I'm suggesting we save 12 million innocent people," Jake replied, "and maybe learn something about these Void Hunters in the process." The decision wasn't easy. For decades, the Coalition had been humanity's enemy. They had defeated human forces, conquered human colonies, and forced humanity to stay in their home system like prisoners. Many of the crew still felt anger about the war and the losses they had suffered. But Jake knew they had no choice. If the Void Hunters continued to spread, they would eventually reach human space. Earth itself would be in danger. Better to fight them now, while there were still allies to fight beside, than to face them alone later. "All hands, this is the captain," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "I know this is difficult for all of you. You've woken up to find that decades have passed, that the world has changed in ways we never expected. But we have a mission now. There's a new enemy out there, something that threatens not just the Coalition, but every living thing in the galaxy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're going to New Geneva to help the Coalition Third Fleet fight these creatures. I know some of you still have anger about the war. I understand that. But right now we're all on the same side. Human Coalition, everyone who wants to see life continue in this galaxy." The crew responded with quiet determination. They were soldiers and spacers trained to face impossible odds. The fact that they would be fighting alongside former enemies didn't matter as much as the fact that they would be fighting for something important. 2 days later, the UNS Valkyrie dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Geneva system. What they saw there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The battle was already underway, and the Coalition was losing badly. Massive biomechanical ships, twisted combinations of metal and living tissue, were systematically destroying the Third Fleet. Coalition energy weapons passed through the alien hulls like they weren't even there. "My God," Lisa whispered, staring at the tactical display. "There are millions of people down there." Jake took a deep breath. After 53 years of hiding, the Valkyrie was finally going back to war. But this time they wouldn't be fighting alone against an enemy they couldn't defeat. This time they had weapons that might actually work. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. "Let's show these Void Hunters what humanity can do." The scene in the New Geneva system was like something from a nightmare. 15 massive Void Hunter ships moved through space like living creatures, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms. Each one was the size of a small city, covered with what looked like metal skin that rippled and shifted as Jake watched. The Coalition Third Fleet was being torn apart. Jake could see the bright flashes of energy weapons firing desperately at the alien ships, but the beams seemed to pass right through them without causing any damage. In return, the Void Hunters fired strange purple energy that cut through Coalition shields like they weren't even there. "Coalition vessels are taking heavy losses," Lisa reported from her tactical station. "I count at least 20 ships destroyed already." The aliens seemed to be completely immune to energy weapons. Jake studied the battle through the Valkyrie sensors. The Void Hunter ships moved in a strange way, almost like they were swimming through space instead of flying. Their hulls constantly changed color and texture, adapting to each coalition attack. "Open a channel to the coalition flagship," Jake ordered. The communication officer, a young man named Pete Rogers, worked at his console. "Channel open, sir. Broadcasting on coalition emergency frequencies. Coalition vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the UNS Valkyrie. We're here to help." The response came immediately, filled with static and the sound of explosions. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Keth Zor. You must leave immediately. This is Coalition space and you are not welcome here." Even in the middle of a desperate battle, the Coalition Admiral was still treating humans as enemies. Jake wasn't surprised, but he was disappointed. Another explosion lit up the Admiral's ship and the communication line went dead for several seconds. When Admiral Zor came back online, his voice was different, more desperate. "Human vessel, my flagship is critically damaged. If you have any weapons that can hurt these creatures, please help us." Jake looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his orders. These people had followed him through defeat and 50 years of hiding. Now he was asking them to risk everything to save their former enemies. "Lisa, target the nearest Void Hunter with kinetic missiles. Let's see if old-fashioned explosives work better than energy weapons." Commander Hayes worked quickly at her controls. The Valkyrie's missile systems hadn't been used in over 50 years, but they came online smoothly. Missile tubes loaded and ready, targeting the alien ship attacking the Coalition flagship. "Fire," Jake ordered. 20 kinetic missiles launched from the Valkyrie's tubes, streaking through space toward the nearest Void Hunter ship. Jake held his breath as he watched them approach the alien vessel. If this didn't work, they were all going to die. The missiles struck the Void Hunter's hull with brilliant explosions. To everyone's amazement, the alien ship staggered under the impact. Large sections of its biomechanical hull were torn away, leaking some kind of green fluid into space. "Direct hits," Lisa shouted. "The kinetic weapons are working." The Void Hunter that had been attacking Admiral Zor's ship turned toward the Valkyrie, its hull rippling with what looked like anger. Jake could see organic eyes opening along its surface, all focusing on his ship. "All weapons fire at will," Jake commanded. The Valkyrie erupted with kinetic fire. Missiles and railgun projectiles streaked through space, hammering the alien ships with old-fashioned explosive force. The Void Hunter's adaptive hulls, which had easily deflected energy weapons, were torn apart by the primitive but effective kinetic impacts. The battle turned into a deadly dance. The Valkyrie used its superior speed and maneuverability to stay away from the Void Hunter's powerful energy beams, while hammering them with kinetic weapons. The surviving Coalition ships, seeing that the human weapons were effective, began providing cover and sensor support. Lieutenant Commander Clark worked frantically in the engine room, pushing the ship's systems to their limits. The Valkyrie hadn't fought a battle in 50 years, and some systems were showing stress from the sudden activity. "Engineering to bridge." Ryan's voice came over the communication system. "I'm showing strain on the main power grid. These old systems weren't designed to fire this rapidly." "Do what you can," Jake replied. "We need every weapon we have." Dr. Blake, monitoring the battle from the medical bay, made an important observation. "Captain, I'm watching the Void Hunter's movement patterns. They seem to follow predictable attack sequences. If we can anticipate their movements, we might be able to hit them more effectively." Jake immediately understood the importance of this insight. "Lisa, coordinate with Dr. Blake. Use her observations to predict where the aliens will be, not where they are now." The new tactic worked perfectly. By firing at where the Void Hunters were going to be instead of where they were, the Valkyrie's weapons began scoring more hits. The alien ships, which had seemed almost invincible, started taking serious damage. Working together, the human and Coalition forces managed to destroy 12 of the 15 Void Hunter ships. The remaining 3 aliens seemed to realize they were losing the battle. They began retreating toward the edge of the system, moving faster than any ship Jake had ever seen. "Should we pursue them?" Lisa asked. Jake thought for a moment. "No, let them go. We've learned what we needed to know. Kinetic weapons work against them and they're not invincible." As the immediate danger passed, Admiral Zor requested permission to come aboard the Valkyrie. It would be the first time in over 50 years that a Coalition officer had set foot on a human ship. Admiral Zor was a tall, reptilian creature with golden scales and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore the blue and silver uniform of the Coalition Navy, and despite his alien appearance, he carried himself with the dignity of a professional military officer. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said formally, "on behalf of the Coalition Third Fleet, I thank you for your assistance. Your intervention saved thousands of lives today." Jake nodded respectfully. "We're all fighting the same enemy now, Admiral. These Void Hunters threaten everyone, human and Coalition alike." Admiral Zor's expression grew serious. "There is much you do not know about this threat. The attacks on New Geneva and other systems are just the beginning. We have intelligence that suggests these creatures are preparing something much worse." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing star charts and battle reports. Jake studied the information with growing alarm. The Void Hunters weren't just randomly attacking systems. They were following a pattern, moving towards something specific. "They're not just destroying planets," Admiral Zor explained. "They're taking something from them, consuming them in some way, and they're using what they take to build something enormous in the Kepler system." Jake looked at his officers. If the Void Hunters were building some kind of weapon or facility, they needed to know what it was. And they needed to stop it before it was completed. "Admiral," Jake said slowly, "I think it's time our people started working together again. This threat is bigger than old grudges and past wars." Admiral Zor nodded solemnly. "I agree, Captain. The Coalition Council will need to know about your kinetic weapons and your tactical insights. Perhaps together we can find a way to stop these creatures before they destroy everything we've built." As the two former enemies shook hands aboard the bridge of the Valkyrie, Jake knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer hiding in the darkness. They were back in the game, fighting for the survival of the entire galaxy. 3 days after the battle at New Geneva, the UNS Valkyrie operated alongside Coalition vessels for the first time in over 50 years. The massive human ship moved through space as part of a joint task force, sharing sensor data and tactical information with former enemies who were now desperate allies. Dr. Blake worked in a special laboratory that had been set up to study captured Void Hunter technology. The biomechanical fragments recovered from the battle were unlike anything she had ever seen. Under the microscope, the alien materials seemed to be part machine and part living tissue, constantly changing and adapting even after being separated from the main ships. "It's not just technology," she explained to Captain Morrison during her daily briefing. "These creatures are made from the converted remains of other species. I can identify genetic material from at least 12 different alien races in these samples." Jake felt sick as he looked at the test results. "You're saying they're made from other people?" "Not just people. Entire civilizations. The Void Hunters absorb everything they conquer and turn it into part of their collective. Every planet they destroy becomes raw material for more ships, more weapons, more hunters." The implications were terrifying. Each Void Hunter ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a tomb containing the converted remains of billions of innocent beings. The creatures weren't just conquering the galaxy. They were turning it into an extension of themselves. Commander Hayes had been working with Coalition tactical officers to develop new fighting methods. The Human Protocol, as they called it, combined humanity's kinetic weapons with Coalition shield technology and advanced sensors. The results were impressive. "We've run combat simulations with mixed crews," Lisa reported. "Human gunners working with Coalition sensor operators can increase accuracy by 40%. Coalition shield operators working with human tactical officers can extend defensive coverage by 60%. The cooperation between human and Coalition crews was surprisingly smooth. Professional military officers, regardless of species, seemed to understand each other. The old hatred from the war was being replaced by mutual respect and shared purpose. Jake received an encrypted message from Earth that changed everything. The communication had traveled for months through hidden relay stations, carrying news that made his heart race with excitement and worry. "What is it?" Lisa asked, seeing his expression. "Admiral Patricia Stone is coming," Jake said. "She's bringing 12 new supercarriers." Admiral Stone had been Jake's mentor before the war, a brilliant strategist who had taught him everything he knew about fleet operations. She had also been working in secret for the past 50 years, building a new human fleet in hidden shipyards beyond Pluto. The new ships were based on the Valkyrie's design, but incorporated lessons learned from the Coalition War. They were faster, more heavily armed, and equipped with hybrid technology that combined human engineering with captured coalition systems. Lieutenant Commander Clark was excited about the technical specifications in the message. These new ships have adaptive armor that can resist energy weapons, but they're still built around kinetic weapon systems. They're specifically designed to fight enemies like the Void Hunters. But the most important information in the message was intelligence about what the Void Hunters were really doing. Long-range reconnaissance had finally penetrated the Kepler system, where the aliens had established their main staging area. They're not just building ships, Jake told his assembled senior staff. They're constructing something called a reality engine, a device that can change the fundamental laws of physics across entire star systems. Dr. Blake studied the intelligence reports with growing horror. If they can alter physical laws, they could make energy weapons completely useless, or change how gravity works, or even modify time itself. They could transform entire regions of space into environments that only they can survive in. The reality engine was enormous, larger than most moons. It was being built from the converted mass of dozens of destroyed planets, powered by the life force of countless extinct civilizations. The Void Hunters weren't just conquering the galaxy. They were preparing to remake it entirely. Admiral Keth Zor brought disturbing news from Coalition intelligence. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected reality engine construction in 3 other galaxies. This isn't just an invasion. It's part of a larger plan that spans multiple galaxies. The scope of the threat was almost too large to comprehend. The Void Hunters weren't just alien invaders. They were a force of cosmic transformation, converting entire galaxies into something alien and hostile to normal life. Ryan Clark worked with Coalition scientists to develop new weapon systems. By combining human kinetic technology with Coalition energy matrices, they created hybrid weapons that were more effective than either technology alone. The new hybrid missiles carry kinetic warheads wrapped in Coalition energy fields, Ryan explained. The energy field disrupts the Void Hunter's adaptive ability just before the kinetic warhead hits. It's like a 1-2 punch that they can't defend against. Field tests of the hybrid weapons were promising, but everyone knew they would need much more firepower to assault the Kepler system. The Void Hunters had turned the entire system into a fortress, with converted planets serving as massive weapon platforms. Jake spent hours studying tactical reports and battle plans, trying to find a way to destroy the reality engine before it could be activated. The problem was that the device was protected by hundreds of Void Hunter ships and planetary defense systems that could adapt to any attack. Admiral Stone's arrival changed the tactical situation dramatically. The Phoenix, her flagship, was a beautiful and deadly ship that represented humanity's determination to never again be caught unprepared. Along with her 12 supercarriers, she brought 40,000 of humanity's best officers and crew. Jake, Admiral Stone said when they met in the Valkyrie's conference room, you've done something remarkable here. You've turned humanity's greatest defeat into the foundation for our greatest alliance. The combined human coalition fleet was the largest military force ever assembled, 200 coalition vessels working alongside 13 human supercarriers, all armed with hybrid weapons and operating under unified command. But intelligence reports suggested it still might not be enough. The reality engine was nearly complete, and once it was activated, the Void Hunters would be able to transform local space into an environment where normal matter and energy behaved according to their rules, rather than natural physical laws. We have one advantage, Dr. Blake pointed out during the final planning session. The Void Hunters' collective consciousness depends on quantum communication networks. If we can disrupt those networks at the right moment, we might be able to turn their adaptive abilities against them. Jake studied the plan that was forming. It would require perfect timing and enormous sacrifice. One ship would have to penetrate deep into the reality engine's defenses and detonate its reactor core at precisely the right moment. The Valkyrie was the obvious choice. It was the most experienced ship in the fleet, with a crew that had already proven they could work miracles against impossible odds. It was also the ship Jake was least willing to sacrifice. But as he looked at the tactical displays and considered the alternatives, he knew there was no choice. The reality engine had to be stopped no matter the cost. The fate of the galaxy, and possibly multiple galaxies, depended on their success. Admiral Stone seemed to read his thoughts. The Phoenix can handle the mission, she offered. Jake shook his head. No, the Valkyrie has been fighting these creatures longer than anyone. We know their patterns, their weaknesses. If anyone can get close enough to that reality engine, it's us. The final battle was approaching, and Jake knew that many of the people in the room wouldn't survive it. But they would face it together. Humans and coalition forces united against a threat that made their old war seem like a minor disagreement between friends. The Kepler system had been transformed into something from a nightmare. What had once been a peaceful star system with several inhabited worlds was now a twisted landscape of biomechanical horror. The Void Hunters had converted entire planets into massive weapons platforms, their surfaces pulsing with organic machinery that defied understanding. At the center of it all sat the reality engine, a structure so large it dominated the system's inner orbit. It was built from the converted mass of 3 planets, fused together into a device that hurt to look at directly. Space around it rippled and bent as the engine tested its power, preparing to rewrite the laws of physics across the entire sector. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Valkyrie, watching the largest space battle in galactic history unfold around him. 200 coalition vessels and 13 human supercarriers moved in perfect formation, their hybrid weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly fire. Admiral Stone's voice came over the communication system from the Phoenix. "All units, this is Stone. Execute Battle Plan Alpha. Remember, we only get one chance at this." The joint human coalition fleet split into multiple attack groups, each targeting different aspects of the Void Hunter defenses. The aliens had thousands of ships protecting the reality engine, ranging from small fighter-sized creatures to massive biomechanical dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the human supercarriers. Commander Hayes coordinated the Valkyrie's attack run from her tactical station. "Enemy formations are adapting to our assault patterns," she reported. "But the hybrid weapons are still penetrating their defenses." The battle was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. Void Hunter ships moved through space like living creatures, their hulls rippling and changing as they absorbed damage and adapted to new threats. But the human coalition hybrid weapons were working, punching through adaptive armor and causing real damage to the alien fleet. Dr. Blake monitored the Void Hunter's quantum communication network from her specialized equipment. "I'm detecting massive data flows between the alien ships. They're sharing adaptation information in real time, learning from every attack we make. How long until we can disrupt their network?" Jake asked. "The quantum disruptor is ready, but we need to be much closer to the reality engine for it to be effective. The signal has to penetrate the engine's core systems to cause a cascade failure." Lieutenant Commander Clark was pushing the Valkyrie systems harder than they had ever been pushed. The 50-year-old ship was performing magnificently, but the strain was beginning to show. "Main reactor is at 112% of rated capacity," he reported. "Hull stress is approaching critical levels in several sections." The Valkyrie fought its way through waves of Void Hunter defenders, its kinetic weapons cutting through alien formations like a knife through paper. But for every enemy ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The aliens were throwing everything they had at the attacking fleet. Around them, the battle raged across millions of kilometers of space. Coalition cruisers worked alongside human destroyers, their crews fighting with desperate courage against an enemy that threatened to destroy everything they had ever known. Ships on both sides were taking heavy losses, but they pressed forward toward their goal. The reality engine began to glow with malevolent energy as the Void Hunters prepared to activate it. Space around the massive device started to warp and twist in ways that hurt to watch. Jake realized they were running out of time. "Admiral Stone, this is Morrison. We're beginning our final approach to the reality engine." "Understood, Jake. All fleet units provide maximum cover for the Valkyrie. Everything depends on their success." The massive human ship accelerated toward the reality engine, its hull glowing from the heat of energy beams and kinetic impacts. Void Hunter ships swarmed around them like angry wasps, but the Valkyrie's crew fought with the skill and determination of people who knew they were humanity's last hope. Ryan Clark made the final preparations for the quantum disruptor bomb. The device would use the ship's main reactor as a massive quantum explosive, sending a disruptive pulse through the Void Hunter's communication network and hopefully destroying the reality engine in the process. "Disruptor is ready," he reported. "But Captain, once we activate this thing, there won't be time to evacuate the ship. The reactor will go critical in less than 5 minutes." Jake had known this moment would come. The plan had always required someone to make the ultimate sacrifice, and he had always known it would be him and his crew. But looking around the bridge at the faces of people who had followed him through defeat and 50 years of hiding, he couldn't bring himself to order them to die. Attention all hands. This is the captain. Prepare for immediate evacuation to coalition vessels. All crew to the escape pods and shuttle bays. The bridge crew looked at him in shock. Sir? Lisa said. Someone has to pilot the ship into the reality engine and activate the disruptor. I can handle that alone, Jake replied. The rest of you have done enough. You've earned the right to see what comes after this battle. Lisa shook her head firmly. With respect, Captain. We've followed you this far. We're not leaving you now. Ryan nodded in agreement. Besides, someone needs to keep the engines running while you pilot us in. And Dr. Blake needs to monitor the quantum disruptor. Susan Blake smiled at Jake with calm determination. We're a team, Captain. We've always been a team. Jake felt tears in his eyes as he realized his crew was choosing to stay with him, even though it meant certain death. These people, who had already sacrificed so much, were willing to give their lives to save the galaxy. The Valkyrie punched through the final layer of Void Hunter defenses and approached the reality engine's core. The massive structure filled their view screen, its surface crawling with organic machinery that pulsed with alien life. Quantum Disruptor is armed and ready, Susan reported. All crew members who wanted to evacuate have made it to coalition ships safely. Jake looked around the bridge one last time. About half the crew had chosen to stay, enough to keep the ship functioning for its final mission. These were the best people he had ever known, and he was honored to die alongside them. Beginning final approach, he announced over the ship's communication system. It's been an honor serving with all of you. The Valkyrie accelerated toward the reality engine's core, its hull beginning to glow from the intense energy radiating from the alien device. Void Hunter ships tried to intercept them, but the joint fleet was providing covering fire, clearing a path for the human ship's final run. As they entered the reality engine's inner defenses, Jake activated the quantum disruptor. The device began to build power, drawing energy from the ship's reactor and preparing to send a disruptive pulse through the Void Hunter's network. The alien structure's defenses tried desperately to stop them, but it was too late. The Valkyrie punched through the reality engine's outer hull and penetrated deep into its core, where the device's central quantum processors were located. Disruptor is ready for activation, Susan announced. Detonation in 30 seconds. Jake took one last look at his crew, these brave souls who had chosen to stand with him at the end. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. The quantum disruptor detonated, sending a massive pulse of disruptive energy through the reality engine and into the Void Hunter's communication network. Across the battlefield, alien ships suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks as their quantum links were severed. The reality engine, its quantum processors overloaded by the disruptor pulse, began to tear itself apart. The massive structure collapsed inward, creating a brief black hole that consumed the converted planets and sent shockwaves across the entire system. The Void Hunter fleet, cut off from their collective consciousness, began attacking each other in confusion. Without their quantum communication network, the individual creatures reverted to basic survival instincts, fighting anything they perceived as a threat. Admiral Stone watched from the Phoenix as the alien fleet tore itself apart. All units mop up remaining hostiles. The Void Hunters are finished. In the months that followed, the Joint Human Coalition Task Force hunted down the remaining Void Hunter ships throughout the galaxy. Without their reality engine and communication network, the creatures were no longer a coordinated threat. The victory led to the formation of the Terran Coalition Alliance, a new galactic government that granted humanity full membership and territorial rights. Admiral Stone became humanity's first representative to the Coalition Council, while the surviving crew members of the Valkyrie became heroes throughout Coalition space. Commander Hayes, now promoted to captain and commanding the new UNS Valkyrie II, often reflected on the price of their victory. They had saved the galaxy, but at enormous cost. The original Valkyrie and its brave crew were gone, along with thousands of other ships and crews from both human and coalition forces. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy was safe and humanity had earned its place as an equal partner among the stars. The old hatred and mistrust between humans and coalition species was being replaced by mutual respect and cooperation. As Hayes stood on the bridge of her new ship, Watching mixed human coalition crews working together seamlessly, she knew that Captain